Hey y'all, I'm Leslie Hooper and welcome to my YouTube channel.
And I'm Steph Miramontes.
Today I wanted to spend a few minutes reacting to a video created by a French woman who spent some time living in the United States, and she breaks down the difference between the habits of the French versus Americans. And I'm sure some of this will come as no surprise to many of you, but I thought it was interesting because it does align with our messaging and how we help our clients adopt the habits and inner psychology of a naturally thin person. So let's see how many of these habits you already have. And Steph, I'm curious to get your feedback as well, because some of this might be a little different than what we do with our own clients. So let's see here.
How come French women don't get fat? As a French woman who spent 5 years living in the US, one question I always got asked was, how come French women don't get fat? How can you guys eat wine and pastries and cheese and all these things and still stay thin? What is your secret? Since I am French, a nutritionist, and lived in the United States, I can give you a few pointers. Are French people actually thinner? If you look at the data from 2016, 36.2% of American adults are obese and 21.6% of French adults are obese. French people also have one of the lowest death rates of coronary heart disease in the world. And this observation led to something called the French paradox, where French people would eat all of this high fat, high cholesterol foods, but would still have the lowest coronary heart disease death rate. Even if the validity of this French paradox has been disputed since, it still led to some interesting research, and it showed that the French diet was generally healthier than other nations' diets. So even if all French people aren't magically thin, of course, the USA tends to look to France for ways to improve their health instead of the other way around. Four main points here. The first one being the French diet, the second one being the French way of eating, the third one being the French relationship with food. So first and foremost, what is the French women's diet? As you may have guessed, the main reason why French women don't get fat is their diet. First of all, French people tend to eat more whole, fresh foods than processed foods. Processed foods are generally the exception in a French meal, whereas whole fresh foods are the norm. Our fridges are much smaller than yours, and that's because you don't really need a huge fridge when you have fresh foods, because anyways they get bad, so you have to go do some regular grocery trips in order to get more fresh foods. Whereas if you just have processed foods that never get bad, obviously you're going to need a big place to store them. French people also eat a ton of fruit and vegetables. I honestly almost never have a meal without at least some sort of fruit or veggie unless I'm eating out. I remember being super surprised when I saw American lunches that had meat drenched in sauce and tons of refined carbs and like candy bars and juice boxes, and then 3 little orange slices as a fruit portion. Water is another very important one. Water is really the main beverage in France. Water is always the drink that is served at mealtime, and it's really rare when we have other beverages. Usually it's for a special occasion. And also, you know that French people love their wine, so yes, some French people have wine for dinner, but usually it's one glass, it's occasionally, and also it's never a replacement for water. They'll still have a glass of water as well. Portion sizes is another huge difference. Portion sizes in America are so huge. Like literally the biggest portion size in France is the smallest one you can get in America. Not kidding. The thing is, when you get used to having these huge portion sizes, then when you eat regular portion sizes, then you don't feel as satisfied. Even if French people eat their fair share of high fat, high calorie, high sugar processed foods, since the portions are much smaller, then it doesn't really have this big impact on them. Snacking is also super rare in France, at least in the way that American people do it. In France, we do snack, but for us, snack called le goûter is actually like a meal on its own. It's usually around 4 or 4:30. We have this small meal in order to wait until dinner because dinner in France is usually around 8. For example, we can have some fruit, some nuts, like a little granola bar, a few biscuits, a little smoothie, and chocolate. And it's nothing like Americans who have a pantry full of snacks, little 100-calorie pack snack bags, and stuff like that that they can just grab on the go all the time, all day, and they don't really have a set time and place to do so. And also, American snacks aren't the same. Often they're like really processed. And snacking is something that I've seen American people do out of boredom or out of habit. And for French people, it's really like a small meal of its own that is here to fuel you up and give you more energy and wait until the next big meal. Now, this next one may be more personal, but I feel like French food has more taste and variety than American food. French people cook with tons of fresh produce, with herbs, with spices, and even like a plate of vegetables tastes amazing. I feel like in America, if the food isn't deep fried or drenched in sauce or in sugar, then it's bland. I also find the fruit here in France to taste so much better than the fruit in the US. We also eat tons of varied meals here. We have lots of variety. Even in school, I remember for weeks on end, I would be having totally different meals with an appetizer, a meal, and dessert that were all different. Whereas in America, I remember having the same 3 lunches on rotation all the time, which from a nutrition point of view is not good because if you're always eating the same meals, then it's going to take more and more of it to satisfy you because your taste buds are going to be used to the taste and it's not going to taste amazing like maybe it did at first. So you're going to want to eat more, you're going to want to add snacks there, you're going to want to add sauce, everything like that to make the meal seem more appetizing. Whereas if you're eating tons of varied food all the time, then you're not going to feel the need to do that. Finally, I really feel like French people value quality over quantity. Like they would rather have this one piece of grass-fed meat, grass-fed steak from their butcher that they know and love and trust rather than have processed meat like for lunch and dinner all the time. Obviously, they have cakes and sweets and stuff like that, but they would rather either bake their own, and when I say bake their own, I mean from scratch, not from a cake mix, or they buy it in like boulangerie, which is where there's like bread and viennoiserie. There's a word for this in English, like croissant, pain au chocolat. I don't know. What do you guys call this? French people prefer doing that over bulk buying industrially processed brownies and cookies every time they go grocery shopping. Also, the whole low fat, low sugar thing isn't really popular here. People would rather have the real version once in a while than have the diet version every day. We know that moderation is key and that we can enjoy whatever we like as long as it's not all the time.
Okay, that was obviously a lot to unpack, and she has only started with the first bullet point here. So I don't think we're going to go through all of them, but I do want to get your initial thoughts and feedback on what she's presented and laid out so far. You were in Europe last summer, so you got some exposure to probably some of this there. I'm curious how this is landing for you.
One thing that I noticed when I was in Paris is that there are no real grocery stores. There are very small grocery stores about the size of a convenience store, gas station, maybe smaller. And they have a good variety of things. They have some candies and things like that, but it is mostly fresh food. It is mostly markets that you're walking by. It is mostly bakeries and things like that. That's the word she was looking for, bakery. And and the food that was served in smaller portions. When dessert is presented, it's not that uncommon to share, which is how I live my life too. Anyway, I don't need a full dessert. I'm happy to share. So that's cool. But yeah, I saw a lot of that, a lot of exactly what she's talking about. And what I will say is that this is very similar to a podcast episode we just did when we talked about environment and how easy it is for your environment to influence the way that you eat. And you have little to no awareness about the impact that it has because the normalization of a different lifestyle, if you put someone who really struggles and buys in bulk grocery and always buys tons of snacks at Costco into a French environment, you're not going to Costco. Costco is over. Costco is dead. You don't get one, right? So you're going to have a very different experience. And the other thing that I've read as I've researched some of this why French women don't get fat kind of thing is that when we're looking at French women in the metro areas in Paris and some of these other city areas, it's different than French women who live in the country. The women who live out in the country actually tend to have more habits that mimic kind of ours than the ones who live in the metro areas. They're walking everywhere they go. They have the smaller fridge. They don't have to, they're not thinking about food all the time. They do have these little indulgent snack periods that are just like a meal and usually have an Aperol or something like that with it. And it's a very sexy, luxurious sounding lifestyle. Is it for everyone? Obviously not, but can we learn a little bit from it? I bet we could.
Yeah, I appreciate two things in particular that you didn't talk about, so I just want to take an opportunity to highlight it, is the snacking. Not doing the American thing where we're always eating on the go. It sounds like their snack is very intentional, like a meal is. Sitting down, being thoughtful about what we're eating, being present, assessing the probably the hunger and fullness cues, because her argument was that dinner is not till later, 8, 9 o'clock. And so to tide people over between maybe a lunch and dinner could be, I don't know, 7, 8 hour stretch, maybe even a bit longer. It would make sense to have something in that scenario. So that suggests to me that eating according to hunger is likely what's happening here, not eating for emotional reasons, which is what she highlighted as Americans eat out of boredom or whatever. Mindless snacking is a big thing here in America. And yes, to her point, oftentimes it is highly processed foods. No shame on that. But I do think that if you're doing that consistently throughout the day, then you're likely going to put yourself in a calorie surplus. Second point I wanted to highlight is she talks about being more picky, maybe more what values quality over quantity, I think is what she's saying, right? So having full fat foods, not chasing the low fat, no sugar version of something. And that is something that we advocate for in the Unstuffed program with our clients is go ahead and eat what you want because that will actually sustain you psychologically, even emotionally, right? If you have a craving, then indulge, have it with your meal, incorporate it into your meal, and then move the hell on with your life because a lot of this restriction, a lot of this telling ourselves no is what creates the craving. It's what creates the desire and the urge in the first place. And so when you give yourself permission to have it, then your brain changes the channel much more quickly and you get to check that box of satiated, full, and move on with your day until you get to your next meal. So that's something that we teach our clients literally from day one in the program of Unstuffed is how to incorporate these foods while still honoring your hunger and fullness, because that's a key part of this equation, right? Is respecting that boundary that your body has. So it does sound like they are more in connection with their bodies and eating less from their minds.
The restaurant that was across the street from the hotel that I stayed in had breakfast, and they had 3 items on their menu: a French breakfast, an American breakfast, and an English breakfast. And they were all the same things. They were all the same exact things, but with like more added on and a larger plate.
Portions,
Yes.
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 Okay, the English breakfast, I thought we were gonna do, what do they eat? Toast and the beans, baked beans or whatever the
Yeah.
hell.
Yeah. There instead it was just like a croissant and an egg and a
Fresh fruit or
cappuccino
something. Yeah.
or something. And then the next one was like a croissant and some toast and 2 eggs and some bacon and a cappuccino and an orange juice. Like it just kept evolving into more and more. And it was just so telling about what they think about
Oh,
us
100%.
when they created
100%.
their menu. I'm like, most Americans don't even eat breakfast. They grab something in their car on the way to go, or they grab those little egg bites at Starbucks and a brownie and a cookie, and then they say they haven't eaten all day, and then they eat their face off when they finally walk through the door at work. Like, it's a whole ass mess, but it's just hilarious. Like, it's just very much the Denny's version of of breakfast versus what I know to be true for most of the people that I interact with. It's not that any is right or wrong or whatever, but it does prove the point of this is what's typical for us. We eat a pastry. It's really good. It's buttery, it's flaky, it's high quality, it's delicious. It scratches that itch. And we need to understand how our bodies actually process food. And I don't mean the chemical processes of food, but the interaction between our gut and our brain and our eating experience. Satiety comes from a deep satisfaction from what we've eaten as a big part of the experience. It's not just about filling up our stomach, which is where the whole diet idea of big ass salad goes so wrong, because it's not about a big ass salad. It's about so much more. Yeah, get your veggies in, get your fiber in, take care of yourself, do the thing. But if you are still looking for something in the pantry after you've eaten your big ass salad and your belly, it looks bloated, and you're just like, okay, I've got bubble guts and a bloated belly and whatever, but I'm still hungry somehow.
But I need something sweet.
Yeah, exactly. I need something sweet. You didn't get satiety. You didn't check all the boxes. Your brain did not get the experience it would like to have in order for you to move on to the next task in your day. It's so inefficient, and it causes more food thoughts.
Okay, I just want to watch the relationship with food piece. And anybody who wants to watch the video independently, I will link it in the description below so you can watch the entire episode. But I really just wanted to highlight the habits. And I think she shifts more into the mindset of French women and how they interact with food, or French people. So here we go.
What is the French way of eating? Obviously, the French diet is super important, but it's not the only reason why French women don't get fat. The way of eating is also crucial. Food education here is super important compared to the States. From a very young age, kids are served a variety of food, and they learn about the different flavors and textures and the benefits of each food. Mealtime is an important part of a French kid's schedule, and they are served 3-course meals that are healthy and balanced. In France, little kids eat the same meals as their parents. I remember going to the US and being really surprised when I saw that parents would make like separate kid-friendly lunches, kid-friendly meals for their kids, which often involved more processed foods and less vegetables. And then they would have their own adult meal later on. In France, there are no kid foods. They're served the same foods as adults, and they grow up liking a huge variety of food that way. And I remember being surprised when I would see American parents have tons of different food options for each kid because none of the kids like the same foods. In France, kids are taught to just eat what is served. Of course, French kids are allowed to have food preferences and foods that they don't like, and their parents aren't gonna force them to eat it. But in general, they are really less picky because they've been exposed to a bunch of different foods. Another big reason why French women don't get fat is because they practice mindful eating, and they do so without even realizing it. Mindful eating is a technique used to regain control over your eating habits. It enables you to create a connection between your mind and your body while you eat, and also enables you to rediscover the different tastes and pleasures in eating foods. The goal is really to listen to your hunger cues, what your body needs, to eat when you're hungry and to stop when you're full, and to really take the time to eat, take the time to chew, and also focus on your meal without any distractions. And French people rarely eat on the go. They have long home-cooked meals with their families, and they also have really long lunch breaks at school or at work. It's between 1 or 2 hours. Whenever I would get a 1-hour break for lunch, I would find that to be super short. This really enables them to eat mindfully and to really savor each and every bite, as opposed to just shoving down their food in a couple of minutes just to curb their hunger. Along those lines, enjoying meals as a family is very important in France. Mealtime is an important part of the day where we can all talk about our days and enjoy a nice filling lunch and eat mindfully. I do remember having the occasional Friday night dinner in front of a movie when I was a kid, but this was definitely not the norm. You would rarely see French families eating lunch or eating dinner with the TV on or in front of the TV. Again, this leads to better food education and more mindful eating. In France, people just also eat out and order takeout much less than in America. Ordering food or eating out just isn't something that people regularly do. It's a treat, kind of something for a special occasion, or if you have really nothing to eat in your house, but it's pretty rare. I'm always surprised at how frequently American people order food off of food apps without even giving it a second thought. Literally almost every meal. Like I mentioned before, home cooked meals are super important here, and people often plan all of their meals so that they can buy all of the ingredients and have them on hand so that they don't find themselves in the situation where they have to order food. And finally, calorie counting isn't really a thing here. People generally know how to create healthy and balanced plates, and they are pretty good at eating the right amount of calories and the right amount of macronutrients. Again, this is thanks to their good food education. They rarely feel the need to count their calories, and fad diets and drastic weight loss methods aren't super popular. And all of this leads to a healthier relationship with food, which is the next big topic I want to discuss.
I like that she brought up the idea that calorie counting isn't a thing there.
Yeah.
And that they eat mindfully, they eat methodically, they eat a wide variety of foods. They're exposed to a wide variety of foods at a young age. There is no mac and cheese for the kids and chicken salad for the adults, which,
I always thought that was so crazy.
yeah,
Like in my home growing up, what was served is what you got. And if you didn't like it, then you were on your own. You could go make yourself something, but that very rarely happens. Sorry,
yeah,
this is what's on the table. And I think that's happened more with like our kids' generation. And I remember one of our clients being like a short order cook and making 4 different plates of food for 4 different people. And I'm like, why are you doing it? Spend so much time. But
yeah.
who am I to judge? I'm just saying, not in my house. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, same. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit, basically. Every now and then, if I know that I made something that my kid hated, like my dad used to make this thing called macaroni and tomatoes. It's like a goulash or something, and gagged me. I hated it growing up. So nasty. I did not want to eat that shit. But it was so rare, and I'm not a picky eater. I've grown up to not be a picky eater. I like a wide variety of seasonings and richness and vegetables and things like that. There are very few. The list of foods that I don't like is very small. It's very small. So and I attribute that to growing up a certain kind of way. We just grew up with this is what was served. And it's not like my mom made these really wonderful, extravagant meals all the time. And we had these wonderful home cooked dinners. We had hamburger helper and shit like that too. Plenty of it. But I just learned different habits when it came to that kind of thing. You just ate what was served. But we also have to acknowledge that kids are not just eating at home. Kids are eating at their friends' houses. Kids are eating at school. Kids are eating in other places. And so I appreciate that she brought up that they are taught. It's a universal way of teaching people how to eat mindfully, respectfully, in tune, versus the way that we are taught to eat, which is fill up your plate with vegetables so you don't get hungry for chocolate.
Also, 3 courses at school, that's wild from an American's perspective.
Yeah.
I would love to see what that actually looks like in practice. I bet it'd be really interesting.
Yep.
But yeah, it does appear to be more of like a community effort to educate children and support just more intentional, right? Giving more fucks, because in America, eating is just very fly by the seat of your pants. And she mentions eating undistracted, which is something we teach our clients as well. They have their 1 to 2 hour lunch breaks. Like in America, people feel like they have to work through the entire lunch break, that if they even take a lunch break, they're eating and banging on their laptops at the same time.
Yep.
Very different socially, culturally, in ways that I think are much healthier than what we execute here in America. All right, let's just check out the relationship with food bit here and wrap this one up.
Which relationship do French people have with food? In general, French women have a much healthier relationship with food than American women. They really take pleasure in eating healthy foods, and they aren't really obsessed with food like some American women may be. Obviously, eating is something very enjoyable that French people love doing, but they see it as a healthy and fun and pleasurable way to fuel their bodies and not as something that they turn to for comfort or that they see as a reward, or it's not something that consumes all of their thoughts the entire day. French women are also less obsessed with their weight than American women. If they gain a few pounds, then they won't really dwell on it too much. They'll just be a little more careful with their food choices until they lose the pounds, and they won't make a big deal out of it. Mireille Juliano, who is the author of the book French Women Don't Get Fat, has this quote, and I think that it sums things up pretty well. She says, French women take pleasure in staying thin by eating well, while American women see it as a conflict and obsess over it. On a similar note, French people are also very good at naturally balancing and regulating their meals. If they know that they're going to go to a restaurant in the evening, then they're automatically going to have a lighter lunch. And if they end up overeating for one meal, then they'll eat a little bit less during the next meal. And when they do overeat, they don't feel guilty about it. They don't feel food guilt. They also eat more intuitively than American people, and this is certainly the result of their good food education and of more mindful eating habits. Also, they don't really suffer from the all or nothing mentality, which means that eat something, if they overeat a little or if they eat something that they shouldn't have, they'll just be like, oh, okay, it's fine. I'll just make it up later. Whereas American people would tend to say, okay, I just ruined my whole day's worth of eating, might as well just eat this entire cake while I'm at it. This is, I think, in part because they have no restrictions or off-limit foods like a lot of American women do.
Okay. Any initial thoughts after watching the relationship with food segment?
It's funny because what she said at the end is what stands out the loudest to me is this very all or nothing. If I screwed up, quote unquote, as if that's actually a thing, I might as well go all in. I might as well eat the whole cake. And the only reason you would ever think you screwed up is if you had all these ridiculous rules in the first place, because you cannot screw up by eating a piece of cake. It is not a screw up. It's a decision you made to eat cake. Like, it's no big deal. It does not have to catapult you into obsession. And where she talks about the conflict, I think that's such an important thing to hear, that we tend to think about this sort of thinness and controlling food and all this as this big conflict, instead of looking at food as a pleasurable way to spend quite a bit of time during our day, every single day until we die. We have so many eating opportunities, so many. So why does every single one of them feel like our house is on fire and our life depends on getting it right? It's so ridiculous, but that mentality fuels this obsessive back and forth, this diety thing that consumes all of our thoughts.
And we also often talk about the idea that eating is not hard. What makes it hard is the dieting, is our rules, is our beliefs about the right way, the wrong way, the good food, the bad food, and all the emotional attachment we have wrapped up in that, and how it is also connected to our identity and what we think about ourselves. So we have this very strong emotional connection to our interactions with food, whereas the French appear to be much more relaxed and fluid in their way of eating, very similar to what we see in naturally thin people, right? That's basically what she is describing here, is not dieters. She is describing a culture of naturally thin people who regulate their hunger and fullness cues. She mentioned, yeah, I didn't love the idea of having a light salad for lunch when you know you're going to be going to a restaurant later, because that really just sends the underlying message of, oh, we're going to be overeating or over consuming. So that part felt a little diety to me, but maybe not, right? Maybe not through their perspective or their reasoning or rationale. Who am I to judge? I'm not in their heads. And there's context missing as well. So I just think everything else, the undistracted eating, the intentional eating, the slowing down, having a ritual with eating, and really enjoying the food, being present, incorporating the things that you love. It's basically the unstuffed program
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
When she said that salad comment, I had that thought too. And then I thought about it a little bit more. And it reminds me of a couple of things. One being that some foods stick to your ribs a little longer than others. And so wanting to be hungry for that meal, particularly if they're close together, which it doesn't sound like they usually are, but if they were, I would probably want to have something lighter, knowing that, hey, if I'm going out to pizza later, and it's just 3 hours away, I won't be hungry for the pizza. So I'll probably eat something a little bit lighter. The same thing applies when we talk about how, okay, we encourage our clients to eat 3 to 4 meals a day and eat when you're hungry, those kinds of things. But let's say Sunday you're going to brunch and I rolled out of bed at 7. Brunch is going to be like at 10 or 11 or something like that. Like I might want to have a little something to hold me over for the morning and then go out to brunch. And it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be overeating later. It just means I want to be hungry for that next meal so I get the full enjoyable experience. And some foods are going to stick around a little longer than others. I don't know if that's the context. That's just what my brain decided to paint the picture as.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying. The context is missing because those things do matter, right? If the meal is going to be, the restaurant meal is going to be 3 hours later, then yeah, you likely don't need a whole ass meal. But if we're talking about the French lunch at 1 o'clock and then their dinner being at like 8 p.m., I don't know about the salad.
Yeah.
Right. So again, there's the fluidity and the adaptation, I think, is what I like, and also what we teach our clients. Again, the context does matter because there are circumstances when it is perfectly acceptable and cool to snack versus eating for emotional purposes to suppress, ignore, neglect, deny thoughts, feelings that we don't want to deal with. And so it's just easier to crack open a bottle of wine and pull out the chocolate and numb ourselves on the couch. That's not what we're talking about here. Anyway, I found that to be pretty on point with a lot of the behaviors and reasons behind the habits that we help our clients develop through a step-by-step process.
Yep.
Pretty bang on compared to most of the things that we have talked about and shared in the past, I would say, in these reaction videos.
One thing that stood out to me is she said French women don't obsess about gaining a few pounds here and there. That has not been the experience that I have heard and read about and things like that. I have heard that there is a lot of body shaming and a lot of pressure to stay thin. In France, that is a predominant conversation, and you are looked down upon if you gain a bunch of weight or even start looking a little something. There's a normalization of body shaming within the culture. I didn't experience that myself while I was there,
I
but
would hope not.
I wasn't hanging out in anybody's kitchen, so I don't know. But and the other thing that comes up when we talk about these conversations is, yeah, but there's still like all the smoking and the appetite suppressant and the body shaming and all of these things. And I'm like, cool. Yeah, no one is perfect. No culture is perfect. And all of these other principles are still really good to have. So why don't we just stop with the yeah, buts and the defensiveness and take a step back and say, what can I learn? What can I apply? What might be helpful? What's an important message here? Instead of going, yeah, but they're all smokers, so they're not hungry. Stop it.
Okay, completely separate issue.
Yeah.
Smoking, eating habits. I just think that people can still have healthy eating habits and be a smoker at the same time. The two are not mutually exclusive in any way whatsoever. I will say a little bit of a pushback on the body image piece. I do think that they likely do have an environment that's pretty toxic in that regard, in the same way that we do here in the States, let's be honest. But I will say, as someone who is a dietitian and likely works with people on these types of things, I feel like she's probably someone who's pretty well educated and works with the right demographic to speak to that, having lived both in America and in France. So I just think that there's really no place that you can go on the planet and not have body shaming, to be totally honest.
I definitely agree with you. And she is clearly the expert on this. And so she probably has a lot of context that I don't have. I'm just talking through some of the things that I've read and things like that, and trying to get on top of what I know the commenters are probably going to start saying. And I'm like, listen, you're just going to distract yourself from this message. You're going to distract yourself from what's helpful by spewing what is unhelpful based on maybe a bad experience or something that you heard or read or whatever. What's helpful is the habits, the message, and everything else is okay. Then don't take that part.
But yeah, we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't have to agree with every single thing that she said or what we say either. Take what's helpful and discard the rest. Isn't that kind of how we all should be living life anyway, filtering it through our own value system and making decisions based off of what aligns with our personal beliefs? You can apply that same filter to our reaction videos as well. So I think that's it for us today. I hope you all found this insightful. I'm curious which out of all the habits or psychological shifts she talks about here resonates with you the most. Is there one that stands out that you want to begin implementing? If so, let us know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and like the video on your way out, and we will catch you on the next one. Y'all have a great week.